And welcome back. It's another episode of Homer Bound, a podcast where a couple of nerds read through and discuss Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. And we are back for Odyssey books 5 and 6. I'm excited. Are you excited?
I'm Wriste. Yes, I am excited.
I forgot to do our basic
no, that's
introductions.
Okay.
I'm Llama.
Yes, now that everyone's filled in on who we are, yes, I am absolutely excited because we finally get to meet our titular character.
We do. It's a fun time. We were talking a little bit before about like just how short book 6 is. It's a little bit of a wild and wonderful journey, but man, it's tiny.
I'll say as I've said before, or as we've mentioned and will continue to mention, this translation that we're using is Dr. Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey. We encourage everyone to read along, of course. However, one feature of this translation is that the translation preserves the same amount of lines that the original Greek had, which takes away some of the guesswork as to, like, I guess what the original pacing might have been. If you crack open like Robert Fagel's version, it's like, you know, a bit denser, and I imagine the books are a little bit longer. I think that he stretched them out a little bit in the Iliad as well. Yeah, no guesswork. And yeah, as you said, book 6 is like not even 330 lines. It's a baby.
It's itty bitty, but nevertheless, I still think there's actually like a decent amount to talk about.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So now that we have the basic introductions that I failed to do out of the way, yeah, again, I'm Llama. He is Wriste.
I is Wriste.
Let's also do our little content warning, which there will be a little bit of interesting content in these two books. We are a little bit immature. We tend to curse. I am incredibly immature, and I have a potty mouth.
And we tend to sometimes take a special interest in the wibbly wobbly parts of human bodies sometimes. So we might just get
silly.
We might get so immature it's disgusting.
Maybe a little bit giggly. It's very.
I won't
likely.
Promise anything either way.
The other thing is, there are themes of violence in the Odyssey and the Iliad. We've obviously already gone through the Iliad and are now making our way through the Odyssey. But, there's some violence, there's some more mature themes, some, and some hugging, kissing, some adult naughty themes at times.
Yeah.
Well,
sometimes.
I mean, in book 5, there's a bit of that.
Is there? So, I guess there kind of
with
is.
Calypso.
Yeah, there's a little bit. You're right.
So we got a little bit of that going on. So, if you are someone with a young set of ears, you might want to beware and listen at your own risk.
Or have a parent ready.
Or have a parent ready. Oh man, imagine a parent and child listening to this together. That
I know, right? To be honest, of the two, of the Iliad and the Odyssey is definitely the more like ideal bedtime story.
Yeah, absolutely. The Iliad's a little more kind of dense, action-packed, violent, whereas the Odyssey is a very kind of adventurous, what will happen next kind of story, which I think does make for a really good bedtime reading material.
As I mentioned in our Iliad discussion, I can't even remember if I've said this earlier, but I'll say it again, I guess. It would be like almost impossible to adapt the Iliad, not just in terms of like television or movie mediums, but like novel as well. I don't know how you
imagine making like the children's book version of the Iliad.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you do that. But the Odyssey, like it could like
the Odyssey, I'm pretty sure I had a kid's version of the Odyssey at some point.
I did too. I think there's a movie out there somewhere. I don't know if it's any good, but it exists.
Who knows? So yeah, why don't we, before we hop into books 5 and 6, I'll do a little recap, which will be very brief. I mean, last time We went through books 3 and 4, in which we traveled to Pylos and Sparta with Telemachus and met Menelaus and
Esther.
Nestor and Menelaus. Nestor first and then Menelaus. It's like had to reach into my brain for Nestor's name there for a second. Oh, to be young again and have my
Your
memory.
favorite old man, you forgot his name? Come on.
I know, right? But yeah, so we learned a lot from Nestor and Menelaus as well. We got some wartime stories, we got some peacetime stories, we learned about the fate of Agamemnon, and we learned, or Telemachus got some really good advice from both of them, just in the sense of them telling him, don't wait too long to go home and take care of the suitor's problem, and it's a shame what they're doing to you and your family. And they both had a chance to talk about how much they love Odysseus. And I really kind of love that as a lead in to books 5 and 6, because, of course, as you mentioned before, books 5 and 6 are our first peek at Odysseus. So up until this point, we haven't really met Odysseus in person. And, there have been many references to him and people talking about how much they love him or miss him, or in the case of the suitors, how much they want to kill him. And
Or how much
we
they don't
haven't
think he's actually still alive.
Yeah,
Also,
exactly.
they don't want to kill
And
Odysseus because they
so
don't even know Odysseus is there.
that's actually very true. They want to kill Telemachus,
Yes.
which is what my brain was reaching for and failed to make that jump. So we've had all of this talk about him, and now we finally get to meet him. And so let's start with book 5, From the Goddess to the Storm.
I mean, it's funny you say we get to meet him because our introduction in this book is not to Odysseus, but it's to more gods convenient talking. I feel like there's less of that in this book than there is in the Iliad. Feels like every other book we're taking an aside to Olympus, but it's usually just kind of Athena on the ground.
Honestly, though, like in this case, I think in the case of the Odyssey, I think it's less asides and more part of the main story. Like I know in the Iliad, it definitely had that feeling at times too, but there were definitely times where you're in the middle of like a big battle chapter or something, and then all of a sudden it kind of cuts to the gods for a few minutes and then it cuts back. But so far for me in the Odyssey, I've really felt like the gods are a little bit more front and center, and you kind of get to know a little bit more about them than I felt like I did in the Iliad.
Athena is definitely more front and center.
Especially Athena, obviously. Because Athena is just, I mean, as far as I can tell, Athena's in like almost all of the books.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was true. I have not examined this, but
I'm just trying to think of a book in the Odyssey where she doesn't pop up at some point. There's maybe a couple of them. I mean, again, I haven't really gone through to, verify this or anything like that, but it just feels like she's so omnipresent within the story.
I mean, this is as much Athena's tale as it is Odysseus's, it seems.
Which I kind of love because I feel like it's just so much fun to have the in-depth story of one of the gods.
Yeah, although kind of like Penelope, Athena is also like a little bit of a black box. Like I don't feel like I really know what she's thinking. Like we know her motives, but we don't really know like what she's thinking. We don't have those internal monologues that I talked about in last episode, where a character will
Athena and Calypso are definitely a little more inscrutable and kind of hard to crack beyond the surface of.
One thing real quick, just to I guess to dive into book 5, I noticed one thing, and I'm not sure if this is a repetition or if this is just a similarity. Sorry, this is a deep cut. So we begin after our introduction of, Dawn got up out of bed and stuff. Athena's talking with Zeus, and she says, Father, all immortal gods, she said, no longer let a sceptered king be kind or gentle or pay heed to right and wrong. Let every king be cruel, his acts unjust. This sounds a hell of a lot like an earlier passage in I say this would be a deep cut. This is book 2 in the Odyssey when Mentor says, now Ithacans, this is on like line 230. It says, now Ithacans, listen, this changes everything. Now kings should never try to judge with righteousness or rule their people gently. Kings should always be cruel, since the people whom he ruled are and such and so. The wording is not exactly the same, but the sentiment feels like weirdly similar. I
Yeah.
don't know what this means. This declaration of no longer let the king be good.
Yeah, that kind of stuck out to me too, because a lot of the books are about like the guest, the home, the way to do things right, the way to welcome people, the way to exhibit good hospitality. And then this kind of sticks out as just like, but kings should be cruel and unjust and
To be clear, I don't think this is meant to be literal. What I suspect is going on is that they are basically saying a good ruler is not rewarded. Yeah, because both of these passages.
no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, because both of these passages speak to like how good a king Odysseus was. However true or untrue that may be, they both say that, and so they're like, no, why would you? Because people have forgotten or forsaken him. And so what's the point of being this? I don't know. I'm curious as to like where the similarities begin and end in the original Greek. Obviously, the substance is like slightly different. Is like different between the lines in book 2 and the lines here, but that stood out to me immediately as like something that I had seen before, and we know that repetition signals something. So
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of saying, like, rule with an iron fist, or else you're kind of going to reap the consequences. Look at my boy Odysseus here. You know, everyone loved him. Everyone, he ruled gently. He ruled well, but look where that got him.
yeah. Although again, I don't think this is an indictment of like ruling fairly. It's just more like a woe is.
No, I think it is
him.
very much the no good deed goes unpunished kind of thing. It's like, doesn't mean it's bad to rule fairly. It just means, like, what are you going to get out of it?
It's asking what the point is. Again, it's kind of, especially from the mouth of Athena, because especially since afterwards Zeus is like, why are you complaining? You already have your plan set up. Why are you complaining to me about this, about Odysseus's plight?
Right. Not only does he say that, he says, didn't you plan this all yourself so that Odysseus can come back and get revenge on the suitors? He like literally says that. Did you not plan this all yourself so that Odysseus could come and take revenge upon those suitors? Which is kind of hilarious, the idea of Athena just going up to him and be like, look at this poor man. He's like, wasn't that you? Like, didn't you do that? But where this takes us is that Zeus tells Hermes to go tell Calypso that the jig is up, that it is time for Odysseus to be allowed to come home, and that he has to make his way to Phaeacia?
I think it's Phaeacia or Phaeacia. Actually, not
Phaeacia. I think it might be Phaeacia. I think you might be right about that. In any case, Hermes puts on his sandals, zip, 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 makes his way down to Calypso, and I love this description of when he reaches Calypso's island and like what Calypso looks like and is doing there. This hearth with a big fire burning and all the smells and the sounds. Like, one of the things that I really, really love about the Odyssey is that it gives you these pictures of what's going on that I can almost see in my mind. Like, I know a lot of times when I was reading the Iliad, I would be kind of trying to form this vision of exactly what's going on. And there's a lot of good kind of scenic descriptors. And obviously you have these epic Homeric similes and stuff like that. But I found that for me personally, like, the Odyssey just paints these landscapes that I can like see really vividly. And I can, the smell the pine and the citrus and like just kind of imagine this cave and this beachy area. Like it seems really vivid to me. I really love that.
As I mentioned, this feels more like a modern novel as opposed to the Iliad. So it would be more a little bit more interested in the moment to moment descriptions and taking care that we are able to be there in those moments, as opposed to like great swaths of like battlefields, flashing bronze, and heroes clashing and all that stuff. We're not limited by having to capture all of those broad generalities. So now we're here. We're able to dig a little bit deeper into the moments. And yeah, I noticed because like the description of Calypso and her island is like more detailed than I think literally anything in the Iliad, and
It is.
it's not even that long. Anything in the Iliad aside from Achilles' shield, which I think we both pointed out was like basically the only time anything got like a strong, detailed, meaningful description. There are a few others, I guess, like Agamemnon's armor. But
Yeah, but
yeah,
still the absolute like breadth of the detail in Achilles's armor and Hephaestus creating it is just stunning.
mm.
And this is kind of one of the same things for me. Like again, it really isn't long. This takes up, I think, 2/3 or so of the page that it's on, but it's just so like rich with detail. And again, I feel like I could be there right now. I want like a tropical drink on this island.
Past the I guess the comparative novelty of this like real actual description of a place. I don't know if Telemachus is, I guess it's Telemachus's house now. Their place
Palace.
at the palace at Ithaca. I don't know if it got the same kind of treatment. What I if we're to still take as significant this signal of, oh, they're describing it more carefully, which means that we need to pay more attention, because I don't think this isn't how every place is treated. I don't think. Maybe it is.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely in-depth descriptions, but I think it's kind of important to place Odysseus in this place and kind of describe the life that he may have been living all this time and stuff like that. I want to hear what your thought was.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. This is like, it's significant that we know what this place looks like because this is where he's been. And not only, well, I mean, there are a few ways we can read it, I guess. If we are to continue interrogating the text in terms of like hosts and guests and hospitality and whatnot, this is Calypso and her house, for lack of a better word. So it's important to know what that looks like, and it's also important, I think, that we recognize what he's walking away from.
Yeah, because this sounds like paradise.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it's got that very like there's lush forests and birds and vines with grapes coiled around the cave, and there's springs, there's meadows. Like it sounds awesome.
Yeah, and
I want to go on vacation here.
this is from Hermes' point of view, and Hermes, who's an Olympian god, even he's like, wow,
Damn.
this place looks good. He's depicted as stunned or amazed. His heart was amazed. His heart amazed at all he saw.
Yeah, and he gazes around in wonder and joy. And I mean, Calypso is a god too. Goddess.
She's not an Olympian god.
She's not an Olympian god, but still, it kind of stands to reason that she could have this paradisey kind of place that would even impress a god, an Olympian god.
Yeah. And I mean, and also, I guess, just to take one last thing away, Hermes' reaction is, I guess we can view it as like an exact opposite of how Odysseus is feeling. Like,
yeah. Well, it then goes on to describe poor Odysseus,
yes,
sitting by the shore, sobbing in grief and pain. And so it's like all of the pleasures of this place and even this person could not distract him from the pain that he's feeling over just
well,
wanting to be home.
the text says as usual, sitting by the shore
Yeah.
as usual, sobbing in grief and pain. So this is not something that comes and goes. This is something that he experiences on a regular and persistent basis.
Mopey Odysseus.
I will say, I'm curious as to so Odysseus has been lost for like 10 years since the Trojan War. I can't remember how long he's been here. Has he been here for 10 years? I can't remember. I actually don't know.
I don't know either.
I know that he got lost at sea and oh wait. I mean, I guess he recounts this. Yeah, he's been here for a while, but I guess I'm curious. My main question is I wonder like how if there is like a period of time where he's like interested in the place, not necessarily as like the place he'll stay forever, but if he ever like indulges in like willingly in the pleasures of this island and Calypso.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question and one that I'd probably wonder about myself. But I will say, from what it sounds like and from what I know, my suspicion would be that he's been through so much that even by the time he gets to the island, that he's
just wants to
probably
get
just
home.
like, he just wants to get home.
Yeah,
Like,
that's fair.
Poseidon has been a total dick to him, and he's just like done with it.
Hmm.
And then that kind of, I mean, that would make sense if he was just always sitting at the shore crying, which is such a sad image. So Hermes and oh, I almost just said Athena, Calypso. Hermes and Calypso get to talking, and Hermes breaks the news to Calypso. Kind of almost regretfully. He says, Zeus told me to come here. I didn't want to. And
I'm unsure if that statement is in reference to I didn't want to tell you this or I didn't want to
it
come
may
here.
just be conciliatory, to kind of say, like, this is not what I wanted to do. I'm really sorry. Because he knows what he's about to do is take her man toy away. And I don't think he wants that to happen. Or no, I'm not Hermes. She. I don't think she wants that to happen. Brain fart. That was a big old brain fart. And I mean, obviously she doesn't, because as soon as he tells her that this is to happen, she flies at him in rage. And this is something interesting. What she starts talking about is something that I think will come up a little bit later as well, about like how there's almost kind of a double standard for her as a goddess, to take a lover to bed.
Yeah, I was going to say she makes a very pointedly gendered remark on what she's being commanded to do by Zeus. Now, to be fair, I'm unsure of exactly what the extent of the truth. My mind also goes to like how basically none of Zeus's lovers are okay because Hera just fucks them as soon as she learns of them. I don't know how universally true this is or how prevalent this is, or how like I guess meaningfully prevalent this is. But the point is, I guess, well taken, right? She
Yeah.
she very much wants to hang out with Odysseus. As I was reading about Odysseus's position, and especially we mentioned like some mild talk of hugging and kissing. We know that Odysseus and Calypso are banging.
They're banging.
It made me think a little bit of Helen in Troy and like how I guess if I don't know what the state of like consent is in this.
Well, I think it goes back to that
for
question
either
of
one.
like, did Helen go willingly, or was she abducted? And if either one of those is true, it has all kinds of implications for her time in Troy.
Yes.
And likewise, I mean, the thing is, like, we know that Odysseus didn't come here willingly, but he has found himself here, and he has obviously been engaging in this affair with Calypso. And so the question is kind of like, how willing can he be, really? He's kind of trapped here with a goddess, but at the same time, it kind of seems, and especially,
They're
a little
they're
bit
they're
later in
goodbye
this
bang.
book, yeah, the farewell bang. I literally wrote in my book farewell bang. Nice.
What does it say again?
One for the road. It says the sun went down and brought the darkness on. They went inside the hollow cave and took the pleasure of their love, held close together. Which sounds pretty damn willing to me.
Yeah, and so
At the same time,
how do we parse this?
At the same time, right before that happens, he's talking about, I know my modest wife could never match her beauty. But I really want to go back home. So it's like, is he doing this as a way of kind of like flattering her into being willing to let him go?
Well, I can say this. I'll make another movie slash literature reference, although it's more of a movie reference for me because I haven't actually read the original poem. I watched The Green Knight in theaters, and I did some reading on the poem after. I probably should have done that before watching the movie because the movie is it doesn't hold your hand throughout. But there's a part where Sir Gawain comes up to this house and he's welcomed in as a guest. So we have like similar themes already of like, being a guest, and one of the deals that he makes with one of the with his landlord or whatever, the lord of the house, is that the lord will give him everything that he finds in the hunt, and he'll give him anything he receives in the house. But it's not just his obligation to the lord of the house, it's his obligation to the lady of the house. The lady really fancies Gawain, and she comes on to him, and he has to, I guess, balance being a gracious guest by not offending his host, because she's his host as well, and this is the chivalric era, I guess, and not sully his own honor in the process by sleeping with this man's wife. And so he like makes compromises. He'll accept kisses from her, and so like he kisses the lord of the house whenever he gives him his hunt. Anyway, this made me think a little bit of that, like how, like if you're this is a very extreme version, obviously. I'm not sure how comfortable I am saying, like, if you're a guest in the house, you better, like, you should at least consider banging
the host. Oh no!
But in these like very heightened worlds, where sex is traded, I think
it's a commodity,
a little more regularly. Like that might inform how we read Odysseus in this particular environment.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely valid read on it, because especially since, like, so we've skipped a little bit forward, but on the page before the farewell bang, Calypso goes to Odysseus and is like ready to tell him, like, okay, I'm gonna let you go, and she finds him and he's all weepy, and it says he had no choice. He spent his nights with her inside her hollow cave, not wanting her, though she still wanted him. So like there's a power imbalance here.
Yes.
That, he has to reconcile himself with, although again, it does kind of seem like he has reconciled himself with that, and that there may at least be part of him that is doing this willingly.
He's certainly had time to. And again, this is sort of like this is the black box that I keep referring to, is like some things just aren't revealed to us, like, or like the particulars don't seem obvious, at least to our modern lens. We're kind of left to speculate. On one hand, we have this passage where we're told that Odysseus is like very resistant to Calypso's advances, and then toward the end, they have their farewell bang, and it seems
sweet love.
Yeah, and it seems to be something that they're both doing. I mean, Calypso has.
I did find it I did find it really interesting that the phrasing that was used, and I wonder what the translation, how, well, I mean, again, we've talked about how her translation is very faithful to the Greek, but like the phrase took the pleasure of their love held close together, I think is important there.
Well, it's important to remember that this farewell bang, we have to come up with a better word for it.
No,
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 yeah,
we
we'll
don't.
keep it up. It is important to remember that this farewell bang is basically after Odysseus has been released from her control. He knows that she's gotten word from the gods to send him on his way. He's built this raft. She's supplied him with stuff. And so, if we want, we can read like pre Hermes visit Odysseus engaging with Calypso sexually, being sort of, I guess, you know,
Transactional.
transactional, or I guess more so for his own state of mind, an assertion of his staying there. Like, you know how when like when someone you don't like talks to you in the hallway, and like if if you talk back to them, you're signaling to them that you like them too, or that you want to
Oh my
engage
God.
them. This would
Yes.
this would be a very extreme version of that,
I think
perhaps.
that's, oh, I really like the way you put that. That's good. That's a good one.
Yeah, but now that he has no obligations to her, I mean, we know that Calypso's super hot, and Odysseus even says so. He's like, "Yeah, your body is way better than my wife's. Still, I want to get back to them, but Calypso's still super hot." But now he doesn't have this obligation or this kind of baggage to go along with sleeping with Calypso. So perhaps he's able to enjoy sleeping with her with a clearer conscience, for lack of a better word, somewhat ironically, um, and double standardly and all that. But with a clearer conscience for himself in that particular, yeah, in that headspace. There we go. That I said what I wanted to say. I said there we go.
It's good. It's good. You did a good job.
I'm trying to put it all together in real time.
I have plenty of challenges with that myself, so I relate to that deeply. And so okay, so they have their farewell bang, and then what interests me and kind of fits in with this theme is that Calypso prepares his journey for him.
Well, Odysseus builds
Gives
the
him
stuff. She gives him stuff.
but she's the one. She is the one fulfilling the host duty.
Yes, she is.
He does the labor, but she's providing all of this stuff for him. I don't think it's anything like particularly of special interest, but it's just one of these things that pops up over and over and over again in the
Mhm.
Odyssey, how important these like hosting rituals are.
I'm not sure if I
And
view this as like her fulfilling her obligation. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe we are, because the previous book has the non-nightmare version of this, where Menelaus is like, "Hey, stay with me for a long time," and Telemachus says, "No, I'd rather go. Give me something to help me, like treasure, and I'll be on my way. I have to get back." And Odysseus is kind of in the same position. So yeah, perhaps now that I'm talking through it, perhaps we can view this as a fulfillment of the host duty. Although this is like very belated. This should have been done earlier. Uh,
oh, for sure. This has been a long time coming and should have happened much earlier,
mhm.
but nevertheless, it's happening. And I do see it actually as a very host duty kind of thing, because otherwise she would just be like, I'm pissed about having to let you go, and I don't want to do anything. Bye.
Yeah, we also know that she's doing this on like divine orders. So saying that she's fulfilling her host's duty is like true. Maybe that's why I was like initially resistant to it,
Yeah, and I think
because it's true, but
that's a really fair point.
yeah.
At the same time,
Mm.
there's part of me that almost kind of sees this as the gods knowing that she's going to be kind of pissed off to have to let him go and being like, this is what you have to do. You have to do it. prepare the journey.
Yes. Before we move on from the island, can I draw our attention to one thing?
Go for it.
Um, so this is also our first. This is where we learn what Odysseus is like. And this is going to permeate like the entire book. The first spoken lines that we get from Odysseus are just doubt. Like as soon as Calypso says, "Hey, I have to like you have to build yourself a raft, and I'll give you food, and I'll give you clothes, and I'll give you wind." I also like how she says after she delivers it, she says, "They, the
You
gods, are more
scalawag.
powerful than me. They get their way." A very pouty kind of addition, almost. If I were to imagine it in my head. But Odysseus is like, "No, you're tricking me. You have to be lying to me. You have some other trick in mind," which is like so perfectly, exactly how Odysseus views the world.
Although I do think it's important that it kind of says that this is informed by many years of pain and loss, because it does harken back to like this guy has been through a lot.
Yes, and of course, if this was like an isolated incident, then, or if this was an isolated response from Odysseus, I wouldn't think much of it. But as we know, like this is how he approaches basically every
Oh
encounter,
yeah.
including like with his wife, to get ahead of ourselves a little bit. And it's interesting because since we're talking about, Xenia or like the welcoming of strangers, that kind of mindset runs opposite to this welcoming of strangers. There's Odysseus carries with him an inherent like distrust of others, which I think runs a little bit against the mindset that it's required to properly observe like a welcoming and hospitality towards strangers. We can track it as we go, or I'll track it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of these days you're gonna say like, can I bring something up? And I'm just gonna be like, no. I would never
Do
do
it.
that
It'll
to
be
you.
funny.
I actually nah. I think the thing that I love about these conversations is we kind of both have those moments where we have something that kind of tickles the back of our head and we get to bring it up
Mm-hmm.
and see things, from a different viewpoint. I love it. So, Odysseus is free from Calypso's island and has like a raft,
Mm-hmm. He's super handy.
and
Like
he's
there's a
very
whole
handy.
montage of him like shining the wood or like smoothing out the wood and spacing out the tacks or whatever and hoisting the sails out of just the cloth that she brings. Like he's good. What a resourceful
Yeah,
guy.
this one of the things that I love about this book is that there's just so much like fascinating description of everything that happens, of the island, of the lush paradise like environment, and this montage of all the building and getting everything done. And then Odysseus sets sail and Poseidon is pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
Poseidon's just like, who let this guy get off? I thought I had, I thought that we were on the misery train here. And I am still on the misery train here, so what's all this about?
Yeah, I also believe that. Oh yeah, okay. So this is what Poseidon says. This is around line 285. Seeing Odysseus floating out in the raft, he says, "This is outrageous. So it seems the gods have changed their plans about Odysseus while I was absent. He's almost reached Phaeacia, whereas it's his destiny to flee the rope of pain that binds him now. But I'll still goad him to more misery till he's sick of it." And I think there's some comments later by him or about him where it's understood that Odysseus will make it back, but Poseidon just wants to make it miserable. It's not really
Yeah,
his
no,
goal to kill
Poseidon
him.
wants this. Yeah, he doesn't want him to die. He just wants him to suffer endlessly at his hand. And like, God, imagine. So he like whips up the winds and creates this giant wave. I like love the water. but one of the most unpleasant things I've ever dealt with was seasickness, and it's only
Oh yeah.
happened to me like once or twice on a particularly rough boat journey, but like, oh man, seasickness is not fun. And I can just imagine like so Poseidon retaliates. Poseidon is not happy that Odysseus is, merrily on his way back towards home, decides to make him absolutely suffer, whips up these waves. Odysseus is like, oh god, not this again. And Poseidon, you know, crashes these waves into him, or all these waves that have been whipped up by this wind crash into him. The rudder slips out of his hands. The raft is going all over the place. He falls into the water and like is just constantly barraged by these waves and trying to get his head above water.
Mhm.
And he finally gets back onto his raft and is just like clinging for dear life. This is nightmare fuel.
It's interesting. He's continuously greeted and aided by other gods. He's aided by Athena.
Yeah.
Well, he will be aided by Athena. He's aided
In this
by
case,
Calypso,
it's
and now he's aided
I
by
know.
yeah, I know.
You know?
I like better. I'm not sure which one it is. I'm not going to look in the
That's
glossary for
fine.
it. Yeah,
But
who
I
who
love
I know nothing about.
I know nothing about either, but the first line that she says to him, I love. It says, "Poor man, why does enraged Poseidon create an Odyssey of pain for you?" And
That I'm curious
she's
about.
she said the thing.
She said the Odyssey. They roll credits, everyone. We're
Right,
done.
roll the credits.
Play
We've
the title card.
I always That's one of those things that I love those, like when the movie says the title of the movie, and here we get the book saying the
They
title.
said the
She
thing.
they said the thing. Um and her advice to him is to get naked and just leave the raft behind, and like everything will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some more specific directions. She tells him to take her scarf, tie it under your chest, and with this scarf, you don't have anything to fear. I like want to know so badly where this comes from and how it works.
Yeah, this is I guess I didn't really give it too much thought now, but it seems like such a weird additional step. Because it's not a challenge. Like, there's no difficulty in putting on the scarf. And when Odysseus makes it to shore, he casts it off back into the sea. And it
Which
doesn't
is
seem like
another thing
anything.
that she directs him to do.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like anything really comes of it. Perhaps this is an example of Odysseus being able to follow directions or instructions. Back really quickly onto the Green Knight. The same thing does happen, where Sir Gawain is given a girdle or a belt or something like that by the lady of the house, which will protect him against the Green Knight. However, he does not give it up to his host. So if we are to like this impromptu weird intertextuality, we can say that Gawain does not do what Odysseus is able to do rather easily in this case, which is to give up this thing which is meant to protect him.
Yeah, I want to know where this comes from.
Yeah,
Like
I don't
I
know.
want to know like the significance of it. I have no clue. But I just love the idea that like this god comes to help him and it's just like, yeah, take off all of your clothes, then put on my scarf, but only until you get to land, and then when you get to land, throw it back into the ocean and just walk away. And that means you'll be safe.
Now, I think it's worth pointing out that everything that Calypso has given him is now gone.
Yeah, that is true. Except for the clothes, which will very shortly not be on his back.
Well, I mean, jumping ahead to like the part where he takes off his clothes because they're weighing him down, and he puts on the scarf. He's loosed everything, and I mean, if we want, we can probably read that as just
shedding all of the memory of Calypso.
Not so much the memory, but just all ties, I suppose. As you said, I imagine there's something more to this scarf that he's received, but I have no idea what it would be alluding to or where it would come from. All we know now is that Odysseus is, for all intents and purposes, completely naked and swimming in the sea.
And then this is where Athena comes in to kind of help further along this plot armor, basically. And Athena basically calms the winds and creates a calm sea that Odysseus can swim from wherever he is in the middle of the ocean now to Phaeacia.
Phaeacia.
And, but yeah, I'm interested to. Oh, we're not supposed to do this, but I'm interested to see how Dr. Dan pronounces this.
I'm sure we'll find out.
I'm sure he knows better than we do. And yeah, Poseidon just making this poor guy suffer, and Athena will not allow it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, she calms the winds, as you said. But then Odysseus has this problem where he can't find shore. Like, he can swim up to the rocks, or he could swim up to the rocks, but he'd probably be smashed against them. And there are and this is something he works out for himself. When he sees this, he's like, I have to find shore. And Poseidon's like throwing waves at him. And there's a couple of interesting parts where, again, like, the influence of Athena is just never not there, to a point where it's almost like weirdly insistent. Like the part where like he's hurled again, said the waves grew big and hurled him at the craggy shore, but Athena has to give him the thought to grab onto a rock, which seems weird because that feels like something that, like, you could do, or like I could have this thought, right? Like, this is not a great divine inspiration moment.
For what it's worth, though, I don't know if you, I mean, I haven't really ever experienced this, but I have friends who have. Like, if you've ever struggled with swimming, which I would imagine that he would after being, at sea for days and getting tossed around on this raft, and then now being, thrown by waves up to this craggy shore, like, it can kind of be difficult to wrap your mind around what to do next if you're in a situation where you may be nearly drowning. So to his credit, I think it might just be Athena being like, this guy can't handle anymore. Let me help him out.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Although, as she's like babysitting Telemachus.
Oh, she's absolutely, like, she's helicopter momming him. I won't let anything happen to my precious little baby Odysseus.
Yeah, so yeah, it's just, I guess it's interesting to see, like, even something as small as grab onto this rock is like part of what Athena is doing. Like, she's stopping the waves, or she's stopping the winds, and she's also like, hey, grab onto this rock so you don't die.
Yeah.
And then he eventually finds the shore and he, relinquishes his scarf.
And what I really like, though, is as he gets to shore, he recognizes that a god has helped him and says, like, unknown god, hear me. How I longed for you. Holy crap, I got away from, Poseidon, making my life a living hell. And then at the very end of this little blurb where he's praying to this unknown god who has saved him, it says, pity me, Lord. I am your supplicant.
Specifically, he's praying to the river. If you remember, rivers are, like, I guess, gods.
That's true.
He swam until he reached a river's mouth with gentle waters. That place seemed ideal, smooth and not stony, sheltered from the wind. He sensed its current in his heart. He prayed, "Unknown God, hear me." And I have gone through so much and reached your flowing streams. And so he's praying to this river whose name he does not know.
Yeah, and the river god, restrains the waves and calms them. Gods really like it when you pray to them. Given my trouble in this podcast with the gods and technical problems, I have been pouring out my wine. I also love the description of Odysseus as he gets up onto shore and just is full of like seawater and brine, butt naked and just exhausted, and like kisses the earth.
It's kind of an iconic image. I'm sure we can all imagine like a movie where a guy who's trapped at sea like finally gets to some island or back home and just kiss
So,
the ground.
God, I hate this because I'm about to ruin another thing for Dr. Dan. But what it reminded me of is actually from a silly movie from Mel Brooks' Robin Hood Men in Tights. When he swims the English Channel and then like gets back and is kissing the sand on the beach and then has to like spit out all this sand. That was the image that came into my mind.
It would not be clean.
And then, he basically is like, I need to find somewhere safe to sleep because otherwise wild beasts are gonna eat me. So he goes into the woods. He finds a little, I don't know, like a little thicket or something.
Yeah, it says a clearing near the water's edge,
Well, it says beside a clearing.
or yeah,
He
beside a
crawls
clearing.
underneath these two like thorny bushes, which of all the places to sleep.
Well, so this was an interesting thing to me. This was like I guess the last thing that uh stood out to me in this book. It says he crawled between two bushes grown together of olive and thorn. I I am so when I read this, I am thinking one is olive and one is thorn. I don't know if they are both of olive and thorn. I don't know if olive bushes are olive bushes thorny.
I have always had the perception that olives come from trees. But I suppose they could come from bushes too. I
I
don't
guess
know.
maybe
I just eat them, okay? I love olives and their oil. They're delicious.
yeah. I don't know. I'm totally unfamiliar with
I think from the grammatical phrasing, two bushes grown together of olive and thorn would imply to me two separate things. But I don't know. I honestly do not know. I am
yeah,
not a horticulturist.
because I mean olive. I think in one of his tags or in one of our discussions, Dr. Daniel pointed out like how ubiquitous olive
Oh yeah,
olives are, or olive oil or oils are, and olive oil is used to like make you all shiny and like clean your
delicious.
skin and
Yeah,
and
to
all that stuff. Um,
it's basically an all-purpose. It's all-purpose.
yeah, so I'm I guess I'm unsure if I'm meant to take this as like a little symbol to take home, right? Sleeping between I guess one thing that you'd consider good and one thing that you'd consider rather undesirable, a thorny bush.
Yeah, so this
Yeah,
is another one of those places where I'm not exactly sure of like what the interpretation is. But what I do know is that when something is described to me like that, I kind of immediately take notice. Like, there is my instinct is that there is a reason that they are telling us about these two bushes that are intertwined. Because otherwise, why mention it?
yeah, and I mean, I guess if we're to read Odysseus onto it, um, there's been plenty of talk of how, and I think there will be in the next book of how Zeus gives like good and bad uh
Yeah.
to whomever, and so Odysseus lying beneath these covered in leaves to keep the cold away uh would be a fairly like if this were the end of a TV episode, this would be something that we would like sort of zoom out on and cut to credits to once we've seen this entanglement of vegetation.
Yeah. And this is how book 5 ends. Odysseus finds this little thicket, covers himself with leaves, and Athena, you know, pours some sleep into him
Drizzles some sleep.
Like olive oil, to drizzle sleep on him like olive oil, and and he shuts his eyes and his painful weariness can end. And that is where we will leave off book 5. We'll take our little break, and when we are back, we will get into book 6.
Hello, dear listener. We hope you've enjoyed listening to the first part of this episode of Homer Bound. There's more to come afterward, but I'd like to take a moment on this break to say a few special thank yous. First, thank you for listening. This podcast has no sponsor. Everything is produced in-house, on our own time, and fueled by our own interests. Sharing in our interests means a great deal to us, and knowing that others enjoy the content means even more. Please follow us on our Twitter at Homer_bound for new episodes, or just keep an eye on the podcast page, wherever you happen to be listening. I'd like to give another special thank you to my friend Llama for hosting the show with me, and I'd like to thank the composer and performer of the music you've been hearing during the transitions, who has said he'd like to be known simply as Llama's father. Thank you, Llama's father. I'd also like to thank Bubbo for her contributions to the audio, Webs2D for some original art, and Total Love for additional art and graphic design, and Ghosty also for additional graphic design. Another special thank you to our numerous guests for lending us their time and expertise, and a last but not least thank you to Dr. Daniel, who anchors every one of our episodes with his insights on our discussions. We appreciate his time and energy, and we encourage you to stick around at the end of the episode to make sure you hear what he has to say. Please consider reading along with us as you listen. We are reading the Emily Wilson translation, and while reading the text isn't necessary for you to follow along, you'll likely get more out of our discussions if you have. Feel free to pause and return later if you wish to do so. Okay, thanks for sticking through our break. I'll give it back to me and Llama on Homer Bound.
And we're back. And I have replenished my tea as per usual. I'm doing a green tea and jasmine blend today.
Ooh.
Which is delightful with some honey in it. I hope you have refreshed yourself as well. Your beverage, getting some stretches in maybe.
Actually didn't. I just recently finished drinking this bottle of green tea citrus. It's a Lipton brand. That's what I have in my refrigerator. Not sponsored or anything. Just say that's what I'm drinking. If you want to be smart like me, drink Anyway.
Way to turn millions of people off of the idea of Lipton tea.
Oh, oops.
For intelligence purposes. No. Not only are they're not millions, but
millions of listeners.
You're plenty smart. Hey,
yeah, I need to drink the Lipton to temper my bulging genius.
No. First of all, don't ever use the word bulging like that again. And second of all, I will hearken back to what Dr. Kira Jones said about, I've met men on the internet too. Which, again, one of my favorite things that has been said on this podcast and probably will remain there up at the very top. It was beautiful. In any case, let's get into it. Book 6 is called A Princess and Her Laundry. Yet again, it's exactly what it sounds like. And
what a great name.
we've talked a little bit about this before. Like this book is super short. It's like less than 300 lines, I think.
It's like around
331 lines. Yeah. So like in context, this is like it ends on 207 and it starts on
197. This is a
when I like this is like 10 pages.
yeah. This is a very easy breezy book. I mean, this honestly, this entire translation is like very easy and breezy to read, which is actually weird for me because since I'm an asshole, I like I
I
like
won't
I
disagree.
like denser looking or feeling text. I like my text thick. I like thick texts. I,
Thick with thick with two C's.
I can't lie,
Thick.
and it makes me feel like there's more to dig into. So for me, this is like, which is not to say that like there isn't like as much to dig into here. But it's a gear shift for me because I'm okay with seeing, as I said, because I'm an asshole. I'm okay with seeing like a page, like sort of bursting at the seams with text and stuff. I mean, I like reading academic stuff. This is not that much different. This is more fun than reading academic stuff. There's still plenty of stuff to parse, but it's a fun story too. So
Yeah. And likewise, I like a nice thick book myself. We've talked about how I've read the Silmarillion and enjoyed it.
I don't know if I'm
I
there.
also enjoy the dense and sometimes very complicated reading that I've had to do for my history bachelor's and will be doing more of coming up. Like it's but there's something about this translation and just the Odyssey in general that it's not necessarily light reading, but it is really pleasurable reading for me. Like I really enjoyed it. I worked through it fairly quickly. And I don't think that was out of it necessarily being the easiest, but it's just it flows really well.
I'd say this is like fairly light reading. Like I think I think someone who's very young could pick this up and the names and stuff aside could really get the gist of what's happening.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think
and
so.
I mean that in a very good way.
I think there's probably some nuance and stuff like that that might be
Oh, of
lost
course.
on the younger crowd,
I mean,
obviously.
lost on me and you, even right?
That being said, we've talked about this before. Like, I read this as a teenager and loved it. So it's definitely a story that is kind of apt to all people of all kinds of levels of reading. But at the same time, there is still plenty to dig into.
How does this compare to your earlier memories of reading the Odyssey, or does
There's
it?
a lot there's a lot more that I read into it now. You know, much in a similar way as rereading the Iliad and finding a lot more to appreciate about it now that I've had different life experiences. I think I'm finding that to be the same with the Odyssey.
I guess I mean in
And
terms
just
of like the translation, like the style or like the.
oh, honestly, I don't. I mean,
Or do you
I
not
I
notice it?
mentioned that my mom had come up to me and handed me the copy of the Odyssey that my sister and I both used, and I didn't remember it at all. I flipped through it a little bit and I was like, huh. This is really interesting. Like, I really don't remember this much at all in terms of that translation. Obviously, reading through this translation, there were parts of the story that I'd start reading through and being like, oh, this is the part where such and such happens. And it would kind of come all flooding back to me. But aside from that, I think
Those
it,
memories are like too distant to really
yeah,
compare. Gotcha. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm older now, and memory retention can sometimes be an issue. Not that I was particularly wonderful at it to begin with, but it's interesting because I remembered a lot more of the broad strokes as opposed to the finer details, and I think as I've grown older, I appreciate those finer details a lot more than I used to. And that might be why I don't remember a lot of it from before,
Mm.
is because you kind of, as a teen, you read through a book and you're like, okay, I get it, I get it, I get it. All the fancy words, blah blah blah. Like get to the good part. And now I'm just like, all of this is the good part. Every single word is the good part.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
So
That
it has
that
definitely
tracks.
been a different experience. I'm curious to know kind of how you feel about it as someone who hasn't really read this all that much up until now.
Oh yeah, it's. I feel like I suspect I've said basically what amounts to my thoughts is it's like super readable. It doesn't have that ultra dense feeling. Yeah, I'll generally stand by like the fact that, or I'll generally stand by my claim that the Fagel's translation is like pretty readable. It's like enjoyable in a way that's not super obtuse to what I would guess is a modern reader. But if I had to like make that claim about the Robert Fagel's translation with like a bunch of asterisks, like you have to be really interested in it and you have to be kind of an academic asshole at heart, sort of a little bit, a tiny little bit.
Why are academics assholes? Academics are wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can be an asshole and wonderful, but the
I know, I've met you.
a bit like this would have none of those asterisks. You know, like again, aside like
Yeah, I think
barring
I agree with that completely.
yeah, again, like barring the names which like might cause like someone who's like a little bit younger a bit of impatience, I think this is like a totally readable and absorbable translation. That's what it feels like to me. And I'm saying this without anything to really compare it to. But I mean, we both talked about how smooth a read this is. I don't know. It has like I was thinking about like how it feels in terms of cinematic terms, or it almost like I wanted to say like it feels very clean. It feels like very
It does.
like
That was
Disney,
something that I found
like
myself
in a good
thinking
way.
over and over. That, like, and I don't know. When I flipped through a few pages of the Fitzgerald translation, which is the one that my mom handed to me the other day, like, it felt so much more complex than this translation feels. This translation feels like it has really just distilled things down to very simple terms, and it makes it really really nice to read. Honestly, it just kind of frank and simple. I don't know, simple is the best way I can put it, and clean I think is another really great way of putting it. It just, there doesn't seem to be much frill to it, and I kind of like that.
Got a lot of fat.
Yeah, absolutely. But on that note, let's actually get into book 6 here, which starts on three words that are just so emblematic of this book, of this epic poem. Odysseus had suffered, and he'll continue to suffer. The suffering has not ended by any means. So, we left off last book with Odysseus covered in leaves, sleeping beneath these bushes. And as he does this, as this book 6 starts, um, Athena is still watching over him.
Yeah, well, she's watching over him, and she's. How do we want to jump into this? You know, do we want to talk like this is Nausicaa's book, sort of.
It
We
is.
jump point of views points. We jump point of view from what was Odysseus to Nausicaa, and we get a scene with her and Athena, sort of.
Yeah, so Athena comes to Nausicaa, and so it's kind of introduced as Nausithous is the king of Phaeacia, and Nausicaa is the princess, the daughter. And Athena comes to her in a dream as her BFF, her best friend, and this is so utterly relatable to me. Athena comes to Nausicaa and says, "You're so lazy. Your mother should have taught you better. Your clothes are lying there in dirty heaps." And, as someone who has frequently had laundry lying in dirty heaps, I feel for her. And why would your best friend be telling you that?
Well,
In any
she's
case,
giving her
it's a
advice.
dream. Yeah,
She's
no,
not saying it to be mean. She's like,
I
oh,
know. It's the frankness with which gods say stuff like this sometimes that just kind of cracks me up a little bit.
yeah.
Um, Because she just says, so lazy. You're so lazy. But she basically is saying, if you're gonna get married, which obviously you want, you're not yet married, you're gonna have to clean up your act. Go do your laundry.
Yeah, well, and she kind of declares like you will be married soon. I don't know to whom. This is me speaking. I don't know to whom. I guess she's coming around that age or something. That's my guess. Which
Yeah,
is
that would be my guess
it's
too.
so the dream also establishes that Nausicaa has marriage on her mind.
Yeah, and this is also kind of a sneaky way for Athena to set this situation up so that Nausicaa will encounter Odysseus.
Yes.
This is the purpose of this dream. But oh man, girl, you need to do your laundry. And and so Nausicaa wakes up from this dream and is like, "Oh, I have to go do my laundry. I'm going to get married. Everything's going to be great." And says, asks her dad, will you set up the wagon for me to go down to, the river, and so I can do all of this laundry so that the sons, the suitors, or oh no, the advisors, like, you should have clean clothes for your for your meetings with your advisors, your five sons also, which kind of like, are they your brothers? Are they not your brothers?
I mean, I imagine. I mean, yeah, they must be her brothers. There'd be no way.
Then why are you saying your five sons? The wording always kind of cracks me up. I know it's probably an issue of like formality and something along
I
those
mean, if you
lines.
want like tie these boys or young men to her dad, what's his name again?
Nausicaa?
Nausithus. If she wants to tie them to Nausithus, then she'd say they're your sons, right? And if it was like a different situation, she might say, "Oh, they're my brothers," right?
Yeah, makes sense. I'm always fascinated by the wording.
Yeah. Uh, Speaking of, I guess the wording, I also find it very interesting. We haven't rang the "this is a performative work" bell in a while,
Ding
but
ding ding.
I think it's very funny to imagine like an old poet giving voice to this young girl, and also the writing has her like using these epithets, right? Like the wagon with the big smooth wheels. I guess don't know if
Nice fresh laundered
I don't know if
clothes.
fresh laundered clothes is an epithet or not, but like the big smooth wheels sounds to me like the big ships or the
Yeah.
sharp bronze spear. It just seems it seems weird, especially said, or it doesn't seem weird. It seems funny to imagine, especially after this like her addressing her father is rendered as "dear daddy." Please, when you set up the wagon,
Yeah.
and it's like this mix of like intense informality and also like what I imagine is like fairly rigid poetic structure. I
Yeah.
don't know how this is like borne out from the Greek, of course, but just as it's borne out here, I think it's funny.
It's a really interesting kind of juxtaposition of the very formal and the very informal kind of smushed together.
She does read like a child, I don't know if she's a child. She does read as fairly young though,
She does read as young. And,
like 14 or 15 or
whenever I hear
something.
like,
I don't know.
I would imagine like early to, early teens ish would be what I would imagine at least. Because like, it does give the impression that she's young. She's too shy to talk to her dad about marriage. She's, you know, everything is kind of prepped for her. They bring out the wagon. Her mom packs her a little lunch, which again, I always get hungry. It's like the really nice meal with olives and cheese and wine. I want that.
That sounds
I want olives, cheese, and wine. That sounds fantastic. And her mom gives her a golden flask of oil for her bath. but then she kind of goes on her way herself. So it kind of makes me think of like when a kid gets old enough that you can kind of let them out the house by
Well,
themselves,
she's going
but
out
you're
with all her
still like,
slaves and stuff, so it's not just her.
yeah, for
She has
sure.
company.
But still, like, you know, she's still kind of going off on her own, doing her own thing though, and her mom, but is still at the age where her mom's packing her a little lunch and snacks and
Mm-hmm.
bath oil. And as she has been, told to do in the stream, she goes and starts doing the laundry. And then all she and all the slave girls bathe and rub themselves with oil. And as they are doing this, Athena hatches her little plan to have Odysseus wake up and see this and ask for help. And this happens in possibly the most disturbing way possible.
Well, this I said in our earlier section this episode about like kissing the ground as being a very iconic sort of image that we have. This is sort of another iconic thing where like someone loses their ball and it rolls up to someone, and then we pan up and it's our hero. It's our main character,
Yeah.
Odysseus, which is exactly what happens here.
Although,
Nausicaa misses the
again,
catch. They're playing ball, whatever that means. They're playing catch or something like that. She misses. It rolls down toward Odysseus. There's a lot of hullabaloo, and Odysseus wakes up, and he's like, "What is this racket?"
yeah, no, I hear all these people. What could this be? And then he jumps out of the bushes, butt naked, with just a leaf to cover up his man bits, and and it says need impels Odysseus to come upon the girls with pretty hair, though he is naked. He's caked in salt. He's like all cragged up from the ocean.
Odysseus is pretty. He's gnarly looking. He's naked. And he's just like here, and like all of the other girls run away from him. Which,
yeah, everyone else scatters.
to be clear, is probably the correct move if like a man who's naked everywhere except for the branch that he's holding in front of his dong or whatever. And like the other slave girls had it right. But Athena put courage into Nausicaa's heart, and she held her ground.
And Odysseus wisely, instead of going straight up to hug her knees, wisely chooses to do this from a distance, to supplicate to her from a distance, because this is literally what it says. The girl might be alarmed at being touched.
This is a very practical way of looking at things, I guess. Odysseus reads the room. You have in your notes that Nausicaa accepts supplication, and I would almost say that this is, I guess, formally this wouldn't be supplication because he doesn't like grasp her knees or anything like that. I don't know if there is a form of supplication that is, I guess, in spirit as opposed to in body. But what I take this to read as is more like, I guess there's more than one way to get what you want out of.
Although I will say, he does make an overt reference to supplication. So basically, he goes into this whole speech where he starts flattering her and saying all these wonderful things about her. Are you a goddess or are you a human? I can't tell. You're so beautiful. And then somewhere like shortly before line 170, he says, "My lady, you transfix me that same way. I am in awe of you, afraid to touch your knees, but I am desperate." So he is basically telling her, like, I want to literally supplicate to you, but I also just hopped out of a bush naked with a branch to cover my dong, and you're so beautiful that I'm like a little bit scared to actually touch you. And to perform that act of supplication.
Okay, yeah.
But to me, it reads as though he's telling her, I want to do this, but I kind of can't.
I actually will accept that. I think that's like a solid read. Although this now reminds me of when Lycaon supplicated to Achilles, and he made like an emotional appeal, or along, like, it's not just the, I guess it's not just the gesture that's important. It's what you say along with it. And he like speaks well of Patroclus, or Lycaon speaks
Yeah,
well of Patroclus when he calls him his strong, gentle friend, as Figgles
yeah.
renders it. And so yeah, we talked about the hugging of the knees and the grasping of the chin, but we haven't really talked about like the words. And Odysseus is like all words.
He's smooth. He's a smooth talker.
Yeah. So
And
yeah.
I find it really interesting that actually one of the things that he hits upon in this speech to her, where he's basically, supplicating from a distance, a safe distance for a nude man, is that he says that, and that man will be luckiest by far who takes you home with dowry as his bride. Because this is something that she's been talking, or at least thinking about, and too
Mm.
shy to talk to her father about it. And then comes this guy who is supplicating to her and saying that, this thing that you want most of all, like, anyone would be lucky to have you. So, like, his methods of flattery are really clever, I think.
Yeah, well, the line right before his his greeting is, his words were calculated flattery, right? So
Yeah.
this is another one of those things where we have to like read into it. I thought this is also like me going back in time again to book, when we talked about book 9 of the Iliad, and I was like, oh, Odysseus like kind of failed in his initial attempt. Like, he's the only one who didn't bring Achilles like closer to coming back to help. And then Dr. Christensen made an interesting point where he said like it's possible that Odysseus knew it had to be him to break this news, because
Right. Someone has to do
someone
it.
had to do it, and he was and he might have been like the least likely to bring Achilles around. And so there's all that, but obviously none of that's like textual. But if we want to give Odysseus like the credit of being like very clever and smart, uh, as as Nausicaa says, "Well, stranger, you seem a brave and clever man." Like he would have to like guess that marriage would be on her mind because of her age, or what have you. And yeah, as you said, like I think it's interesting that he brings up like, yeah, whoever marries you would be really, really lucky.
Yeah, I love that bit. And so she kind of, and I also really like what she says back to him, now that you've brought it up. Like, part of what she says back to him is that that Zeus apportions happiness to people, to good and bad, each one as he decides. Your troubles come from him and you must bear them. But since you're here, and, I will take you in as my guest. I will show you the town. You won't want for anything. You'll have food, you'll have clothes. And then she calls back to her slave girls. This cracked me up, genuinely. She calls back to her slave girls and says, "Wait, girls, why are you running from this man?" Yeah, why would you run from the naked dude that just popped out of the bushes?
Oh, also, just
Imagine
as a
that.
correction, I guess the present king is Alcinous. Uh,
Oh,
the other guy must have been older. Uh,
okay. Someone from
yeah, we
further back in the line.
yeah we just missed it. But yeah, that's her dad, Alcinous, or Alcinous. I don't know if you would make the
I think it
C
would probably be Alcinous. I like the way that sounds more, so that's what I'm going with.
on a like mild, like quick tangent. I was reading through I was reading some of the Lattimore translation, and Achilles is written, I believe, as Achilleus.
Oh, I hate
I
that.
love that. That's like super cool. Like it has such a rhythm to it, like Achilleus, as opposed to like Achilles, which has like kind of extended, long, like stressless stretch of the name. And in any case, that's the end of the tangent.
Very interesting. I like Achilles far more.
That's fair.
I I might have to let that percolate a little bit though, because I think sometimes when you think of it at first and you're just like, "Ooh, no, I don't like that."
Mm.
But sometimes first impressions are fleeting. Although it would seem not in this case, because Nausicaa's like totally cool with Odysseus, just and really kind of I'm not sure I would say takes pity on him, but she kind of does. I mean, she says this man is lost. Poor thing, we have to look after him. And what she says after is so emblematic of this guest, this Xenia, this concept of Xenia, which is all foreigners and beggars come from Zeus, and any act of kindness is a blessing.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I think this might be extra textual. But this is what the Phaeacians are known for, which is not necessarily their hospitality, but like they're of the sea, and they will often like help people find their way to
It
places
it
by the
seems
sea.
like they're almost a little bit of an oasis for people. You know, the concept of an oasis, a kind of heaven sent reprieve in a desert full of, and this is obviously kind of the opposite of that. This is the little piece of land in the middle of a vast ocean,
Mm.
but it has that feeling of like a waypoint for the stranded traveler or something like that. And this seems to not be an uncommon thing for them. So yeah, so they start giving him some clothes and stuff to wash down and supplies to wash himself and clean himself up down by the river. He gets a little glow up. I He asks them to let him wash himself in private since, quote, I am shy of being naked with you, pretty girls with lovely hair. Which is just funny. And he also, like, at this point, in this introduction has kind of made up a story about who he is and where he came from, which is
Yes.
completely a lie. We've talked about this before, how like he is very good at kind of spinning a yarn and coming up with a story to kind of conceal who he really is and not let on his real story, and he does that here.
Yeah, he tells a brief yarn about how he's from. I'm not even sure how I'd pronounce this. Ogygia, Ogygia, something like that. And for 20 days, storm winds and waves were driving me adrift yesterday until some god washed me here. Which is like, aside from the geographic location, is not like a complete lie. He has been sort of tossed and turned by the waters. Uh, but
Yeah, I
he's
think
fudging the
it's
details here.
interesting because in most of the stories that he does tell that are like origin stories that are not really true, there are always kind of nuggets of what has actually happened to him.
I think that's true. I remember thinking that in my initial read. I didn't track it because I was just trying to absorb it. But that's also something that I'll be keeping an eye out for as we read.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, but like every example that I can think of is like, no, there's a little bit about this that is actually something that has happened to him. It's just kind of shrouded in, fibs. But so he goes off to wash. He washes himself up, and this is like the glow up of the century because this Athena also kind of pours attractiveness onto him. I love the way they describe it. It's like as when Athena and Hephaestus teach a knowledgeable craftsman every art, and he pours gold on silver, making objects more beautiful. Just so Athena poured attractiveness across his head and shoulders. Like talking about these ultimate kind of crafts people of the gods, and just like this, she is just making him like super attractive. He's got these gorgeous curls in his hair. You know, he's bigger and sturdier. And when Nausicaa sees this, she's just like, "Are you the same person?" And and basically says, "I want a guy like this as my
Yeah,
husband. Can I marry this guy?"
I was gonna say, I was gonna point out that very thing. She's thirsty for 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 a
She is
husband,
thirsty
and
for Odysseus.
but of course he has the glamour of the gods behind him. So who wouldn't want a piece of Odysseus? Odysseus.
Yeah, but then like this kind of presents a problem for her because the next thing that happens is she kind of has to come up with this plan for, she's basically saying, you'll come to the palace and we'll take you in as a guest and we'll help you out. But like I can't just bring you up to the palace. We can't really be seen together because if I come up to the palace with this like super hot dude, they're gonna like they're not gonna be happy about it and they're gonna like question me and almost kind of, she's afraid of being shamed. She's afraid of being shamed for being with a man that she doesn't know and, bringing this stranger up.
She gets to exhibit some cleverness of her own, right? She is despite the earlier comments about how young she is, she's also clearly very aware of things. She does not blindly just lead him in. She's like, okay, this looked bad, so here's what we're going to do, right? You're going to follow me in. You're going to follow me in, but when we get in, you're going to like break off and leave. You're going to go to like a clearing that belongs to or a courtyard or something like that that belongs to Athena or was it Poseidon? I can't remember.
She says the meeting place surrounds Poseidon's shrine.
Yeah.
But then there's also a grove of poplars by the road.
Yeah, it has
and there's a fountain and a
there.
meadow, and that is Athena's place. Which I think it's kind of funny how like this meeting plan kind of hinges around the places of the two gods who are both like on one side being incredibly antagonistic toward him and then on the other side saving his ass all the time.
You by saying that you've further clarified how I view the two bushes that Odysseus puts himself between.
Oh. Okay. All right. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Congratulations.
That is I'm a genius.
Yeah.
What can I say?
You don't need to drink Lipton green tea citrus to have throbbing intellect.
Why always with the
why?
throbbing and the bulging?
Just do it to annoy you. That's it. There's no other reason.
You should know by now that you don't even need to try to do that.
Well, yeah, but extra mustard goes a long way. Anyway, she hatches.
I do love mustard.
She hatches this plan, which is very clever. So it's like, wait until I've come back and then come.
Yeah.
And then appeal to my parents.
Yeah, and I find it really interesting what she tells him about appealing to the parents, because she actually says to pass her father over and to supplicate to her mother.
I'm unsure of what the upshot is of that. I don't have, unlike with the Iliad, I don't have like a strong memory of, or really like a huge memory at all of what happens specifically in these books. So when we read forward next time, I'll be very interested to see what comes of that instruction.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if it kind of has to do with, in a lot of ways, the women being the tenders of hearth and home, and the supplication to her meaning that he will reach his home safely. Because that's essentially what she says. If she's good to you and looks upon you kindly in her heart, you can be sure of getting to your house, back to your family and native land. And right before she directs him to do that, she says, you'll find my mother sitting beside the hearth by firelight, spinning her amazing purple wool. And that just kind of signifies to me that she's pointing her mother out as almost kind of the caretaker of the home, or the one who spends her time inhabiting the home. I don't know. I could be kind of off course with that, but I feel like, again, it's one of those things that when they say it, I'm like, I know this has to have some kind of meaning to it.
I suspect we'll get a clearer picture when we dive into book 7 and so on.
That's also very true. So yeah, I'm really interested. That's one of those interactions that also kind of caught my eye. Pass over my father and go to my mother and embrace her knees and supplicate to her. And that will mean that you find your way home safely, back to your family. And that's basically where the book ends. I mean, the book ends with Odysseus once again praying to Athena, who, to make sure that he gets a kind welcome in Phaeacia.
Mm.
And Athena hears him, but doesn't appear to him, as she sometimes does, kind of out of respect for Poseidon, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I actually I bracketed those lines because I thought it was
Me
interesting
too.
too. Uh, and Athena heard him, but did not yet appear to him, respecting her own uncle in his fury against Odysseus till he reached home. I mean, all this, like what this mainly says to me is just, there are some things that have to be observed, right? Like Poseidon is mighty, and he has to get a bit of his way. But it's interesting that
Yeah.
dynamic is still like present, and it works. And like when gods are at odds with each other, it's I don't know, like they have to navigate it. uh,
Yeah, and I think there's also the kind of angle that, she has to show some deference to her greater and more powerful uncle.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
But
This is
yeah,
a short book. It's 331
it is
lines
such a
long.
short book. It kind of whips by, but it's also kind of a hilarious book. You know, Guy pops out of a bush naked while this girl is doing her laundry and is just like, "Help me!" And she's like, "Okay."
Yeah, that's what I mean. I guess that's what I meant when I say it's. I mean, we both said this is like a more straightforward story in general. Um, there, I think we'll come across some stuff to parse a little more closely, but we're still sort of. I guess the story is still teasing us a little bit. It's holding us away from knowing exactly what's happened, and
It absolutely is. And I think like how we've talked about like how I don't know, it can kind of go both ways where like it's simpler so there's not as much to parse, but that kind of makes me want to dig into it all the more and see what meaning there can be found in things that seem more straightforward on the surface, but could have, all kinds of different meanings, whereas the Iliad I think was just a lot more convoluted, and I've found myself like not having to struggle as much to come up with like questions about what the fuck was going on.
so true. They're totally different stories. It's actually wild how
Yeah,
different they are.
which I kind of love because it does bring that question into my mind of, who was Homer, and were there many Homers or one Homer, and
Who were
it's
Homer?
just who were Homer, and because it's just so different. It's so different. So I know that that for me at least has been kind of a lingering question. But yeah, I think that's a great place to end book 6. And with that, I will lead us into the marvelous Dr. Daniel's tag.
Yeah.
Listen to it. Always listen to it because they're always fantastic. And I can't wait to hear what he has to say about these 2 books.
Yeah.
So with that, I will throw it to Dr. Dan.
Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel, otherwise known as Dr. Daniel, Dr. Dan, or the Dancing Grad, and I'm here to offer some thoughts on Llama and Wriste conversation about the Odyssey, books 5 and 6. This tag is going to be a little bit language heavy, because there were a few questions throughout the conversation that hinged on how things looked in the ancient Greek, whether certain passages mapped onto other passages, so I apologize in advance, but I get to go a little bit language grammar nerd on all of you right now. First of all, Wriste pointed out a seeming similarity in the sentiment that is expressed by Athena in Book 5 and a sentiment expressed by Mentor in Book 2. In Book 5, starting around line 7 or so, I'm quoting from Emily Wilson's translation here, quote, "Father and all immortal gods," she said, "no longer let a sceptred king be kind, or gentle, or pay heed to right and wrong. Let every king be cruel, his acts unjust. Odysseus ruled gently like a father, but no one even thinks about him now." Compare this against Mentor speech in Book 2, which begins at around line 228 in Emily Wilson's translation. Now, Ithacans, listen, this changes everything. Now, kings should never try to judge with righteousness or rule their people gently. Kings should always be cruel, since the people whom he ruled as kindly as a father have forgotten their king, Odysseus. The sentiment here, as Llama put it very succinctly, is basically no good deed goes unpunished. Why should kings be kind and gentle when their people are going to mistreat them in certain ways? What's fascinating about this is that Wriste's intuition was actually correct, and I don't mean that in a wow, Wriste was correct sort of way. I mean that despite the changes in the translations between Athena's speech in Book 5 and Mentor's speech in Book 2, the ancient Greek is actually exactly the same. The same 6-line passage literally gets copied and pasted from Book 2 into Book 5 with only one change, namely the first line that gives an indication of who the speech is addressing. Athena's speech begins in Book 5, line 7, with Zdeu pater da loi makares theoi aia neontes, Father Zeus and the other blessed gods who live forever. Mentor's speech in Book 2, beginning at line 229, starts Kek lutede nun meo ithakesioi, hoti ken epo. Listen now to me, Ithacans, what I'm saying, or what I'm about to say. Then in each passage, the next 5 lines are exactly the same. Me teseti profron aganos kai epios estos, skeptu kos basileos, me defresen aisima eidos. Let no scepter-holding king, who still has his right wits about him, be mild and gentle, not even if he knows what is fated in his mind. Alaye kalapos teye kai aisula restoi, but let him forever be terrible and do awful things. Hosu tis memne taioduse yoste oio la on oisinanase pater, dos epios eien. Since no one remembers godlike Odysseus, no one of the people over whom he ruled, and he was gentle like a father. So as Wriste pointed out, whenever we've had these repetitions in the past, what's really interesting is to see them in the context that they are contained within, and to see what changes from one context to the next. The connection between Mentor and Athena seems pretty straightforward, since Athena actually assumes the guise of Mentor as a disguise pretty frequently. The purpose of both speeches seems pretty aligned here as well. Mentor is trying in Book 2 to get the Ithacans onto the side of Odysseus against the suitors. Athena in Book 5 is trying to get Zeus onto Odysseus' side. So, Dr. Wilson's decision to render the same 5 lines in Greek in 2 different ways in Book 2 and Book 5 seems to highlight the differences in the situations between the 2 passages. Mentor is powerful, but he can only do so much to try to get the Ithacans to rally against the suitors. Athena, on the other hand, as is revealed in Zeus's speech immediately following her speech, has a lot of power here, especially as a goddess, over what happens to Odysseus. So similar sentiments are expressed by 2 similar yet very different characters. The next topic that I want to focus on is the description of Calypso's island. As Llama said, this place sounds like paradise, and like her, the description makes me want to grab a nice drink and sit on the sand. This type of description in a narrative is called an ekphrasis, defined as a description of a sort of static location in terms of landscape, in terms of colors, and things like that. As Llama and Wriste pointed out, we didn't get too many of these in the Iliad. The closest example we have is the description of Achilles' shield, but even then it's not really a pure ekphrasis, because ekphrasis tends to have to do with landscapes and natural features and things like that. So why an ekphrasis here, and why now? I think that Llama and Wriste are exactly right to suggest that we need this description here to understand where Odysseus has been all this time. I want to suggest, though, that this ekphrasis also works on a more meta-narrative level as well. When we get an ekphrasis in the story, all action stops. We stand and look at basically a static picture of what's going on here, and this description of about a third of a page or so stops the action in its tracks. We don't get any battles, we don't get any movement, we just have a description of this location. It's a beautiful description and a beautiful ekphrasis, but it's hard to deny that the placement of it here stops the action in terms of the narrative flow. So, if I can frame my suggestion in terms of an analogy, an ekphrasis stops the narrative flow of the Odyssey in the same way that Calypso stops the homeward flow of Odysseus on his way back home to Ithaca. Form matches content. We get a narrative pause, as it were, with this ekphrasis when we start talking about Odysseus and his pause in his journey home. Llama and Wriste also had some great thoughts on the relationship between Odysseus and Calypso and how consensual it actually was. Odysseus basically gets shipwrecked on Calypso's island, so he really has no choice but to stay there. In terms of whether he was willing to be there with Calypso, though, there are 2 points in the text that I want to bring up as evidence to suggest that he did want to be with her at one point, but maybe not so much towards the end. In Book 5, starting around line 151, we meet Odysseus for the very first time in this entire narrative, and when we first meet him, he's crying. Quoting from the translation here, his eyes were always tearful. He wept sweet life away, in longing to go back home, since she no longer pleased him. This is an exact rendering of the Greek, epe uketi heindane nymphe, since the nymph no longer pleased him. That adverb there, uketi, is pretty telling, though. It implies that he no longer wants her, but he did once upon a time, probably earlier on during his stay in the island. However, towards the end of his time on the island, during what Llama terms the goodbye bang, around lines 225 to 227 of Book 5, some really interesting language is used in the ancient Greek. Elthontes darato gemuko speius lafuroio terpesthein philoteti parale loisi menontes. In that last line there, the main verb is terpesthein, which is a middle verb, which is a voice of a verb that indicates that you're performing some sort of action with a self-interested motive. What's really interesting about this verb, too, is that it's dual in number, which means that it's going to be 2 people who are the subject of it, namely Calypso and Odysseus. The dual is relatively rare, and it's used a bit in Homer, but usually to indicate natural pairs, like 2 eyes, 2 hands, or things like that. So the use of the dual here, in the middle voice in this verb, seems to indicate that both Odysseus and Calypso are willingly partaking in this activity because they're both getting something out of it. They're taking delight in their lovemaking, terpesthein philoteti, and then also that the last clause of the sentence, par alleloisi menontes, literally staying next to one another. Alleloisi is what's called a reciprocal pronoun, meaning that one person does something for somebody else, and that person does it back in return. So the use of a dual verb here, and a middle voice, in addition to a reciprocal pronoun, seems to imply that Odysseus is in this as much as Calypso is, at least according to the ancient Greek. Some more fun lexical things to bring up. In Book 5, when Odysseus gets basically raft-wrecked or shipwrecked out on the ocean by Poseidon, the goddess Ino appears to him and asks, "Hey, Odysseus, why is Poseidon putting you on, quote-unquote, such an odyssey of pain?" And this does seem to be a very clever wordplay on Emily Wilson's part, but it's an extremely clever wordplay when we look at the ancient Greek. The ancient Greek begins around line 339. Kamore tipte toiode poseida on enosikthon o dusatek paglos hotitoi kakapola futewe. Ill-fated one, why does Poseidon the Earthshaker hate you so much, or hate you in this way so terribly, since he is creating so many terrible evils for you? The main verb in this sentence is odusato, which derives from the verb odusomai, which means to hate or to be angry against somebody. This verb, odusomai, actually gives us the etymology of the name Odysseus, which means something like hated by gods and men. So this is, I think, one of the most clever puns in Emily Wilson's translation. She takes the verb odusato and turns it basically into a noun here, an odyssey of pain, a very clever wordplay from the etymology of Odysseus' name and this verb odusomai, which means to hate or to be angry against someone. And finally, 2 smaller points to finish off this tag. First off, Odysseus goes into the woods to hide from the elements and animals and other human beings. Quoting from Emily Wilson's translation in Book 5, starting around line 475 or so, he found a place beside a clearing near the water's edge. He crawled beneath 2 bushes grown together, of olive and thorn. And there was a discussion about what this meant, olive and thorn. The Greek is actually slightly different here. Doius darupe luthed thamnus ex homothen pefu otas homen fulies hode laies. Quite literally here, he comes underneath a double bush that's grown from the same source, one of wild olive and one of cultivated olive. So I think the thorns that Dr. Wilson is referring to here in the translation comes from the Greek thamnus. It often indicates some sort of brambly bush or something like that. But the olives here are actually a little bit more specific than the translation makes it seem. Foulier, I believe, is wild olives, and elaye refers to cultivated olives. Finally, as Llama and Wriste point out, the characterization of Nausicaa is very clever in the way that she's presented, in the way that she interacts with other people. For example, when she meets her father and wants to ask him for something, she begins her speech with "Dear Daddy" in the translation from Emily Wilson. This is actually pretty much an exact faithful rendering of what's there in the Greek. Book 6, line 57, the address from Nausicaa to her father is "Papa File," basically, Dear Daddy. Papas is sort of a familiar form of the word for father, which in Greek is pater. So basically, Dear Daddy is exactly the right way to translate that, and it lends a nice sort of characterization to Nausicaa. That's about all I have for this tag, so thank you for listening, and I'll throw it back now to Llama and Wriste.
Thank you once again, Dr. Daniel, for your time and insight. Always enjoy hearing what you have to say about our discussions, and thank you, dear listener, for tuning in. We hope you'll take the opportunity to read along with us, since there's plenty to love in these stories, and please keep an eye out for our follow-up episodes by following us on Twitter at Homer_bound, or wherever you happen to be listening to us now. We hope to see you in the next episode. See you then.